The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as my daughter's voice cut through the garage like a rusty blade. "Why do you stay with him, Mom? He's such a loser. You're way better off with Uncle Troy. At least he knows how to have fun and isn't covered in motor oil 24/7. I froze under the hood of Mrs. Patterson's Honda, my knuckles white against the cold metal. 16 years old, and Mia already had her mother's talent for twisting the knife just right. Through the thin walls of our suburban Chicago home, I could hear my wife Sophie's laugh, that new laugh she'd developed over the past 6 months. Sharp, brittle, nothing like the warm sound that used to make my chest tight with love. "Mia, don't talk about your father that way," Sophie said, but her voice carried no real conviction. "He works hard to provide for us." "In that disgusting garage? Mom, you make 3 times what he does at the law firm. You could do so much better. Uncle Troy has that amazing club downtown, drives a BMW, wears actual suits instead of those gross coveralls." Uncle Troy. My wife's so-called business associate, who'd been sniffing around our marriage like a dog in heat. Troy Brennan, 42 years old, never married, owner of that flashy nightclub called Pulse in the trendy part of downtown. The kind of guy who'd peaked in high school football and spent the rest of his life trying to recapture that glory. I wiped my hands on my coveralls and climbed out from under the Honda. My reflection stared back from the grimy window. Jake Morrison, 38 years old, 5'10", still in decent shape thanks to my boxing days, but showing the wear of 15 years fixing other people's problems. Calloused hands, permanent grease under my fingernails, and apparently a daughter who saw me as nothing more than an embarrassment. The conversation upstairs had gone quiet, which somehow felt worse than the insults. I grabbed a beer from the mini fridge I kept in the garage and settled into my worn leather chair, the one piece of furniture Sophie hadn't replaced during her recent home improvement phase. Everything else had been upgraded to match her new image: sleek, expensive, cold. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Meeting with clients at Pulse." Pulse. Always Pulse these days. 3 nights this week alone, she'd been working late at Troy's club. Funny how a corporate lawyer suddenly needed to conduct so much business at a nightclub. I scrolled through our text history, watching our marriage dissolve in digital form. 6 months ago, her messages had been warm, full of inside jokes and plans for weekend trips. Now they were cold, functional, like communications between strangers sharing a mortgage. The garage door connecting to the house opened, and Mia appeared, dressed in clothes that cost more than most people's car payments. Designer jeans, a crop top that showed too much skin, makeup applied with professional precision. At 16, she looked 25 and acted like she owned the world. "Dad, I need $100, she announced, not asked. "For what?" "Does it matter? Mom said you'd give it to me." I studied my daughter's face, looking for any trace of the little girl who used to help me work on cars, who'd sit in this very garage for hours, asking questions about engines and life. That girl had vanished somewhere between her 14th birthday and her mother's midlife crisis. "It matters to me," I said quietly. Mia rolled her eyes with theatrical disgust. "God, you're so cheap. Mom's right, you have no idea how to live. It's for dinner with friends, okay? Not that you'd understand having a social life." "Your mother said that?" "She says lots of things, like how she married too young, settled for too little, how she could have had a completely different life if she'd made better choices." Each word hit like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. "And what do you think?" "I think she deserves better than this." Mia gestured around the garage with obvious disdain. "This whole setup is so embarrassing. My friends' dads are doctors and lawyers and business owners. Mine fixes cars. Nothing wrong with honest work. There's nothing wrong with ambition either. Uncle Troy started with nothing and built an empire. He drives a BMW, lives in that amazing penthouse, knows all the important people in the city. He treats Mom like a queen, not like some housewife whose only job is to make dinner and do laundry. Your mother doesn't do laundry. We have a service for that. You know what I mean. Mia's voice rose with frustration. He makes her feel special, alive. When she's with him, she actually smiles and laughs and acts like herself instead of some zombie going through the motions. When she's with him? The question slipped out before I could stop it, and Mia's face went pale. She'd revealed more than intended. I meant when we see him at family events and stuff. He's Dad's business partner, remember? Right, business partner. We stared at each other for a long moment, the truth hanging between us like smoke. My 16-year-old daughter knew exactly what was happening, probably had known for months. The humiliation burned in my chest, hot and acidic. The $100? Mia pressed, apparently deciding to brazen it out. I pulled out my wallet and handed her 5 20s. She snatched the bills without a thank you and headed back toward the house. Mia. She paused at the door, not turning around. Your mother and I built this life together. This house, your college fund, everything you take for granted. It came from honest work in this garage. Maybe that's the problem, she said softly, and disappeared inside. I sat alone in the garage as darkness fell, nursing my beer and listening to the sounds of my family preparing for another evening without me. Sophie's heels clicked across the hardwood floors upstairs as she got ready for another business meeting. The shower ran for 30 minutes, twice as long as usual. I heard the hairdryer, the opening and closing of jewelry boxes, the rustle of expensive fabric. At 8:30, she appeared in the garage doorway like a vision from another world. Black dress that hugged every curve, heels that added 4 inches to her height, makeup that transformed her from suburban mom to urban sophisticate. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves around her shoulders, and she wore perfume I didn't recognize, something expensive and intoxicating. How do I look? She asked, but her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Like you're going somewhere that isn't a business meeting. Sophie's smile turned cold. Don't start, Jake. I'm networking, building connections that could advance my career, something you might understand if you had any ambition beyond this garage. Networking, is that what we're calling it? What's that supposed to mean? I stood up slowly, setting down my beer. It means I'm not stupid, Sophie. 3 nights a week at the same club, coming home at 2 a.m. smelling like another man's cologne, spending money we don't have on clothes and jewelry I've never seen before. You're being paranoid. Am I? Show me your phone. The request hung between us like a challenge. Sophie's hand moved instinctively to her purse, clutching it tighter. That's ridiculous. I'm not showing you my phone like some teenager asking for permission. Then we have a problem. No, Jake. You have a problem. You're so insecure and jealous that you can't handle your wife having a life outside this house. I work hard, I deserve to have fun, and if you can't deal with that, maybe we need to reconsider this whole arrangement. The words hit like a slap. 15 years of marriage, and she was talking about our life together like a business contract up for renegotiation. What exactly are you saying? Sophie checked her watch. A new Rolex I definitely hadn't bought her. I'm saying I'm tired of walking on eggshells around your insecurities. I'm tired of pretending I'm happy with this small, boring life we've built. I'm tired of feeling guilty for wanting more. More what? More everything. More excitement. More passion. More respect. When I'm out with successful people, people who appreciate me, I remember who I used to be before I got trapped in this suburban nightmare. Trapped? Poor choice of words, she said quickly, but the damage was done. Look, I'm late. We'll talk about this later. Will we? Or will you come home at 2 a.m. and pretend this conversation never happened? Sophie paused at the door, her back to me. If you don't like the way things are, Jake, you're free to file for divorce. But I'm done apologizing for living my life. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with the scent of her expensive perfume and the echo of 15 years crashing down around my ears. I waited exactly 10 minutes after Sophie's BMW pulled out of the driveway before I made my decision. Grabbing my keys and phone, I climbed into my pickup truck, a 10-year-old Ford that ran like a dream because I maintained it myself, and headed toward downtown. The drive gave me time to think, to really process what had just happened. My wife had essentially admitted she was cheating, dared me to divorce her, and walked out without a backward glance. 15 years of marriage reduced to a business transaction she was ready to dissolve. Pulse occupied a converted warehouse in the trendy River District, all exposed brick and neon lighting. The parking lot was full of expensive cars, BMWs, Mercedes, Audis, the kind of vehicles that represented everything Sophie thought she was missing. I parked across the street and settled in to wait. The club's entrance was designed to intimidate, with massive bouncers checking IDs and a velvet rope system that made people feel special for being allowed inside. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the interior: sleek bar, dance floor packed with beautiful people, VIP sections elevated above the crowd like modern-day thrones. I didn't have to wait long. At 9:15, Sophie's BMW pulled into a reserved parking spot near the entrance. She climbed out, smoothed her dress, and walked toward the club like she owned the place. The bouncers waved her through without checking ID, and she disappeared into the pulsing lights and music. 5 minutes later, a silver BMW, newer and more expensive than Sophie's, pulled into the spot next to hers. Troy Brennan emerged like something from a magazine ad: perfectly styled hair, tailored suit, confident swagger of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. I'd met Troy exactly twice in the 15 years Sophie had worked at Morrison and Associates. Both times at company parties, both times he'd treated me like furniture, politely ignored while he focused his attention on my wife. He was handsome in an obvious way, the kind of man who'd been told he was special since childhood and never questioned it. Troy strode into the club like a conquering hero, and I knew with sick certainty that my marriage was over. The only question now was how much dignity I could salvage from the wreckage. I pulled out my phone and called my best friend Ray Martinez, who owned a boxing gym downtown and had been trying to get me back in the ring for years. "Jake? What's going on, man? You sound like hell." "I need a favor, Ray. Can you meet me downtown? I'm going to do something stupid and I need a witness." "Where are you?" I gave him the address and waited. Ray arrived 20 minutes later in his battered Chevy, took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. He just climbed into my passenger seat and waited for me to explain. "Sophie's in there with another man," I said simply. Ray followed my gaze to the club, then back to my face. "You sure?" "Sure enough." "What do you want to do about it?" That was Ray. No judgment, no platitudes, just practical questions and unwavering loyalty. We'd known each other since high school, had boxed together, stood up at each other's weddings, shared the kind of friendship that didn't require explanations. "I want proof. Real proof, not just suspicions and circumstantial evidence. If I'm going to blow up my life, I want to be absolutely certain I'm right." Ray nodded and pulled out his phone. "My nephew works security at half the clubs downtown. Give me 5 minutes." While Ray made his calls, I sat in the darkness watching my wife's car and thinking about the conversation with Mia. My own daughter saw me as a failure, an embarrassment, someone her mother had settled for in a moment of poor judgment. The worst part was, I was starting to wonder if they were right. When had I become so small? When had my world shrunk to this garage, this routine, this comfortable but unremarkable life? I'd been a decent boxer in my 20s, had dreams of opening my own chain of auto shops, had plans that extended beyond fixing other people's cars for 40 years. But life had intervened. Sophie's pregnancy with Mia, the mortgage, the steady paycheck that became too important to risk. One compromise at a time, I'd traded ambition for security, dreams for stability. Now my wife was inside that club with a man who'd never made those compromises, and my daughter saw me as the consolation prize her mother had won in life's lottery. Ray ended his call and turned to me with a grim expression. My nephew Carlos works the VIP section. He says your wife's been coming in 3 times a week for 2 months. Always sits at Troy Brennan's private table. Always leaves with him around midnight. Leaves with him how? Together. In his car. Carlos says they're not exactly subtle about it. The confirmation hit harder than I'd expected. Knowing and knowing were different things, and now I knew. There's more, Ray continued. Carlos says Brennan's been bragging about it. Calls her his suburban conquest. Talks about how he's showing her what she's been missing married to a grease monkey. The rage that filled me was pure and clean, like nothing I'd felt since my boxing days. Not the messy anger of hurt feelings, but the focused fury of a man who'd been pushed too far. I need to see for myself. Jake, that's not a good idea. You go in there looking like you want to kill someone, you'll end up in jail. I'm not going to start a fight. I just need to see it with my own eyes. Ray studied my face for a long moment, then sighed. Carlos can get you in through the service entrance. But you stay calm, you get your proof, and you get out. No heroics, no confrontations. Promise me. I nodded, though we both knew promises made in anger were worth less than nothing. The service entrance led through the kitchen and storage areas, past servers carrying overpriced drinks to people with too much money and too little sense. Carlos was waiting for us, a kid in his 20s with Ray's eyes and his mother's common sense. They're in the VIP section, table 7, he said quietly. But listen, Mr. Morrison, whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. Brennan's got connections with the police, the city council, people who can make your life very difficult. I just want to see. Carlos led us through a maze of service corridors to a maintenance door that opened onto a balcony overlooking the VIP section. From there, I had a perfect view of table 7 and the couple occupying it. Sophie sat pressed against Troy's side, her hand on his thigh, her head thrown back in laughter at something he'd whispered in her ear. She looked radiant, alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. This wasn't a business meeting or innocent networking. This was a woman in love, or at least in lust, completely absorbed in the man beside her. Troy had his arm around her shoulders, his fingers playing with her hair in a gesture so intimate it made my stomach clench. He was talking animatedly, probably telling her how beautiful she was, how she deserved better than her boring suburban life, how he could give her everything she'd ever wanted. I pulled out my phone and started recording, capturing the touches, the kisses, the obvious intimacy between them. Evidence for the divorce that now seemed inevitable. But as I watched through the half-open door of the VIP lounge, something else became clear. This wasn't just an affair. It was a performance. Sophie was playing the role of the glamorous, untethered woman of the world, head thrown back in laughter, fingers trailing along Troy's wrist, leaning into him as if gravity itself had shifted in his direction. Troy, for his part, was the eager audience, smirking, nodding, feeding her lines, basking in the reflected glow of her attention. They were both acting out some fantasy of the life they thought they deserved. Champagne flutes, velvet booths, no children's bedtime stories, no mortgage payments, no quiet evenings on a worn couch watching reruns. The worst part was how happy she looked. Not guilty, not conflicted, but genuinely happy. Eyes bright, cheeks flushed, shoulders relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. The smile she gave Troy was unguarded, effortless. It was the same smile she used to give me on our honeymoon, the one that had made me feel 10 feet tall. Seeing it directed at someone else didn't stab as sharply as I'd expected. Instead, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. "Seen enough?" Ray asked quietly, his voice barely above the muffled bass thumping through the walls. I nodded once and stopped the recording. We slipped back through the service corridors, past stacks of liquor crates and the smell of spilled beer, and out into the parking lot. The cold November air hit like a slap, clearing my head. I stood under a flickering streetlight, breath fogging, phone heavy in my pocket. "I'm sorry, man," Ray said. "I know that was hard to see." Actually, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. It was clarifying. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know exactly where I stand now. No more wondering, no more hoping I'm wrong. She's made her choice. And the truth is, she's been making it for a long time. I was just the last one to admit it." Ray studied my face in the sickly orange glow. "So what's your next move?" I looked back at Velocity Lounge. Through the tinted glass doors, I could still see silhouettes moving under colored lights, expensive cars gleaming in the valet line, beautiful people pretending their lives were as perfect as their Instagram feeds. That was the world Sophie wanted now. Shiny, loud, uncomplicated. I'd spent years trying to give her stability, predictability, safety. Turns out, she'd been starving for something else. "I'm going to give her exactly what she asked for," I said. Ray raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "Freedom. No more pretending. No more half measures. I'm filing tomorrow morning. Full custody request for Mia, since Sophie's new lifestyle isn't exactly child-friendly. I'll ask for the house. She can have the condo downtown if she wants it. She can keep the jewelry, the car, most of the savings. I just want Mia's future protected and my name off the mortgage. Clean break." "You sure about that?" "Sounds generous." "It's not generosity. It's strategy. The longer I fight over money, the longer Mia stays stuck in the middle. I'd rather walk away with my daughter's trust than with an extra 20 grand. Ray nodded slowly. "And Troy?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Troy's already on borrowed time. His club's bleeding cash. The tax liens are public record. The harassment settlement is easy to find if you know where to look. I'm not going to blast it everywhere, not yet. But I've got screenshots, court filings, old employee statements saved in a folder labeled insurance. If he tries to come after me, or worse, tries to play stepdad to Mia, I'll open that folder. Quietly, professionally, through lawyers. He'll fold faster than a house of cards in a windstorm." Ray whistled low. "You've been busy." "I've had a lot of nights alone." We stood in silence for a minute. A couple stumbled out of the club, laughing too loudly, clinging to each other. I wondered how many of those relationships were as hollow as the one I'd just watched. "You gonna tell Mia tonight?" Ray asked. "No, tomorrow after school. I'll keep it simple. Mommy and Daddy are going to live apart. She'll still see both of us. Nothing changes about how much I love her. Then I'll let her ask whatever she needs to ask. She's 16. She's smarter than both of us combined." Ray clapped me on the shoulder. "You're going to be okay, you know that?" "I know I'm going to survive. That's step 1. Step 2 is figuring out what comes after." I drove home with the windows cracked, letting the cold air scour away the last traces of the club's perfume and cigarette smoke. The streets were quiet, the town asleep. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark, except for the porch light Mia always left on for me. Inside, I hung my coat, kicked off my shoes, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I opened the folder I'd been adding to for weeks. Bank statements showing unexplained weekend withdrawals, hotel receipts in Troy's name, photos from mutual friends' social media where Sophie glowed beside him, the video I'd just recorded. I drafted an email to my attorney. Subject line: "Filing instructions. Urgent. Attach the most damning files. Hit send at 1:47 a.m. Then I stood, walked upstairs, and paused outside Mia's door. Soft music leaked out. Some indie band she loved. I didn't knock. She needed her sleep. Tomorrow would be soon enough to change everything. In my own room, I lay down fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in months, the knot in my chest had loosened. Not gone, just looser. Sophie had chosen her fantasy. Troy had chosen his conquest. I was choosing something simpler. Truth, however brutal, and a future I could build without lies holding it together. I closed my eyes. Sleep came faster than expected, deep, dreamless, the kind I hadn't had in months. Tomorrow I would wake up, make breakfast for my daughter, file the papers, and start walking forward. Not because I was strong, because I was finally done being weak. The next morning, Sophie didn't come home until 7:30, long after I'd left for the garage. She'd texted around midnight saying she was staying at her friend Cassandra's apartment because she'd had too much to drink and didn't want to drive. Another lie to add to the growing collection. I spent the morning working on Mrs. Patterson's Honda and thinking about strategy. The old Jake would have confronted Sophie directly, would have played the hurt husband demanding explanations and promises to change. But that Jake had been a fool who believed in salvaging something that was already dead. The new Jake, the one born in that club parking lot, understood that this was war, and wars weren't won by playing defense. My first call was to Tom Bradley, a divorce attorney who'd gone to high school with Ray and me. Tom had built a solid practice handling messy divorces for middle-class clients, and he had a reputation for being thorough and ruthless when the situation called for it. "Jake Morrison," Tom said when his secretary put me through. "I haven't heard from you in years. What can I do for you?" "I need a divorce attorney, a good one." Tom's tone shifted immediately to professional sympathy. "I'm sorry to hear that. How long have you been married?" 15 years, one daughter, 16 years old. Joint assets include the house, my business, savings accounts, retirement funds. My wife makes about 3 times what I do, and she's currently having an affair with a club owner named Troy Brennan. "Do you have proof of the affair?" "Video, photos, witness statements. She's not being particularly discreet about it." "Good. That makes things easier. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still impact asset division and custody arrangements. Can you come in this afternoon?" I made the appointment and spent the rest of the morning documenting everything I could think of: bank statements, credit card bills, mortgage documents, business records. If Sophie wanted to play hardball, I'd make sure I was prepared. The garage phone rang around noon, Mrs. Patterson calling about her Honda. "Jake, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I just heard the most awful rumor about Sophie. Someone at the grocery store said she was seen at that nightclub downtown with another man. I told them they were crazy, that Sophie would never do such a thing, but I thought you should know what people are saying." My stomach dropped. If Mrs. Patterson had heard the gossip, it was already all over town. In a community like ours, news traveled faster than wildfire, and infidelity was premium entertainment. "Thanks for letting me know, Mrs. Patterson. People love to talk." "Oh, Jake, I hope you know I don't believe a word of it. Sophie's always seemed like such a devoted wife and mother." After I hung up, I sat in my office staring at the phone, knowing it would ring again soon. And it did. 3 more calls in the next hour, all from well-meaning neighbors and customers who'd heard variations of the same story. By evening, half the town would know that Jake Morrison's wife was cheating on him with some rich club owner downtown. The humiliation was almost worse than the betrayal. Not only was I losing my wife, but I was becoming the neighborhood's object of pity, the poor fool who couldn't keep his woman satisfied. At 2 o'clock, Sophie's BMW pulled into the driveway. She walked into the garage wearing yesterday's dress and carrying her heels, looking like exactly what she was, a married woman coming home from another man's bed. "We need to talk," she announced. "Yes, we do." Sophie set down her purse and crossed her arms, immediately on the defensive. "I know what you're thinking, but last night wasn't what it looked like." "What did it look like?" "Like I was having an affair, which is ridiculous. Troy and I are friends, business associates. Yes, we had drinks. Yes, we talked, but nothing inappropriate happened." I pulled out my phone and showed her the video I'd taken. Her face went white as she watched herself kissing another man, her hands in his hair, his hands on her body. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter? The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Sophie's shock quickly turned to anger. You followed me? You spied on me like some creepy stalker? I followed my wife to see if she was cheating on me. Turns out she was. It's not that simple, Jake. You don't understand what's been happening, how I've been feeling. Then explain it to me. Sophie began pacing the small office, her bare feet silent on the concrete floor. I've been dying, Jake, slowly suffocating in this life we've built. Every day is exactly the same. Work, home, dinner, television, bed. No excitement, no passion, no sense that we're building towards something bigger. We built a good life, a stable life, a boring life, a safe, predictable, mind-numbing routine that was killing me one day at a time. So you decided to have an affair. I decided to remember who I used to be before I became just another suburban housewife. Troy makes me feel alive, desirable, like I'm worth something more than cooking dinner and doing laundry. We have a service that does the laundry. You know what I mean. Sophie's voice rose with frustration. When I'm with him, I feel like myself again. The woman I was before I got pregnant and married and settled for this small life. Settled? The word hung between us like an accusation. Sophie realized what she'd said, but it was too late to take it back. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? Sophie sat down in the chair across from my desk, suddenly looking exhausted. I meant that we were young when we got married. I was 23, pregnant, scared. You were the safe choice, the responsible choice, the man who would provide for me and the baby and never leave us. But not the man you loved. I did love you. I do love you. But love isn't always enough, Jake. Sometimes people grow in different directions, want different things. What do you want? I want to feel alive. I want passion and excitement and the sense that my life matters. Troy offers me that. He makes me feel beautiful and desirable and important. And I don't. Sophie's silence was answer enough. I leaned back in my chair, studying the woman I'd been married to for 15 years. She was still beautiful, still the girl I'd fallen in love with in college, but she was also a stranger, someone who'd been planning her escape while I'd been planning our future. So what happens now? I asked. I don't know. I need time to think, to figure out what I really want. No. What? I said no. You don't get to keep me on hold while you decide whether your boyfriend is a better option than your husband. You made your choice last night, and every night before that. Now you get to live with the consequences. Sophie's face hardened. Don't threaten me, Jake. You need this marriage as much as I do. More, actually. I make 3 times what you do. I carry the health insurance. I pay most of the mortgage. You think you can just throw me out and maintain this lifestyle on a mechanic's salary? Watch me. You're being ridiculous. Even if we got divorced, which would be stupid for both of us, you'd never get custody of Mia. She's 16, old enough to choose where she wants to live, and she's made it very clear she prefers my lifestyle to yours. Each word was calculated to wound, and they hit their mark. Sophie had found my weaknesses and was exploiting them with surgical precision. Maybe, I said quietly, but you're forgetting something important. What's that? I'm not the same man I was yesterday. Yesterday's Jake would have begged you to stay, would have promised to change, would have accepted whatever scraps of affection you were willing to throw his way. But that man died in a nightclub parking lot last night. Sophie leaned forward, suddenly wary. What's that supposed to mean? It means you wanted excitement and passion and consequences? Congratulations, you're about to get more than you bargained for. I stood up and walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the handle. Pack a bag, Sophie. You're not staying here tonight. You can't throw me out of my own house. Watch me. And if you try to come back before we figure this out legally, I'll call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. You wouldn't dare. I turned to look at her one last time. My wife of 15 years, the mother of my child, the woman who'd just told me I was the safe choice she'd settled for in a moment of weakness. Try me. I showed Mia the same video I'd shown Sophie. My daughter's face went through a series of expressions: shock, denial, anger, and finally a cold acceptance that made her look far older than 16. "So what?" she said finally, voice flat. "So she kissed someone? Big deal. Maybe if you were a better husband, she wouldn't need to look elsewhere for affection." "Mia." "No, Dad. You don't get to play the victim here. You drove her away with your jealousy and your small-town mentality and your complete lack of ambition. Uncle Troy treats her like a queen. He takes her to nice places, buys her beautiful things, makes her feel special. What do? You fix cars and drink beer and act like that's enough." The words landed like punches I'd seen coming but still couldn't block. I let them hit, felt the sting, then took a slow breath. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly. "I fix cars. I drink beer sometimes. I never pretended to be anything else. But let me tell you what I also do. I paid every bill on time for 17 years, so you never once worried about lights going out or food on the table. I sat with you every night you had nightmares until you were 12. I drove 3 hours each way to your regional track meets when no one else could. I worked double shifts so you could have braces, dance lessons, that phone you're holding right now. I never asked for credit. I just did it because you're my daughter and I love you." Mia crossed her arms tighter, chin up. "Mom says you were controlling, that you checked her phone, questioned every late night, made her feel small." "I checked her phone once," I admitted. "After she started coming home at 3 a.m. smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. After she changed her password and started deleting messages right in front of me. I didn't install spyware. I didn't follow her. I asked questions. She lied, every time. Eventually, I stopped asking because the answers hurt too much. But I never raised my voice, never touched her, never threatened her. That part, she's rewriting history to make herself the hero and me, the villain." Mia looked away, toward the empty spot where Sophie's BMW had been parked 10 minutes earlier. "She said you'd try to turn me against her." "I'm not trying to turn you against anyone. I'm trying to give you facts so you can decide for yourself. Look." I pulled up my phone again, this time opening the banking app. I scrolled to the last 6 months. These are the charges on the joint card. Hotel in the city, 3 nights, $1,200. Boutique in Chicago, $800 dress she never wore home. Jewelry store, $3,400 bracelet. Guess who paid? Not Troy. Me. While I was eating ramen in the break room at the shop so we could cover the mortgage. Her eyes flicked to the screen, then away. "She said those were business expenses." "Business expenses don't come with champagne and rose petals on the bed. I have the hotel receipts, photos from the club's security feed, texts where she told her sister she was finally living. I didn't show you those because I didn't want to hurt you more, but if you want the full picture, I'll show you." Mia swallowed. "I don't want to see." "Okay, then trust me when I say I didn't throw her out. I asked her to choose. Stay and work on us, or go and live the life she clearly wanted. She chose, packed the bags herself. I carried them to the car because she asked me to. I didn't slam doors, I didn't yell, I just said goodbye." Tears welled in Mia's eyes now, but she blinked them back hard. "She said you'd fight for custody, try to keep me from her." "I asked for joint custody, 50-50. I want you to see her. I want you to have both parents. But I also want you safe. Troy's club has had 3 health code violations in the last year alone. Underage drinking stings. A bartender arrested for selling to minors. I don't want you around that environment unsupervised. If the judge agrees, you'll spend school nights here, weekends wherever you want, as long as it's safe." Mia laughed, bitter. "Safe? Like this house is safe now? It's empty. Mom's gone. Everything feels broken." "It does feel broken," I said. "Because it is. But broken things can be rebuilt. Not the same, different, stronger in new ways. I'm not asking you to forgive me or hate your mom. I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I'm still the dad who's always been here. The one who shows up, The one who doesn't run when things get hard. She stared at the garage floor for a long minute. A single tear escaped, tracked down her cheek, dripped onto her sneaker. I don't know what to believe anymore, she whispered. That's okay. You don't have to decide everything today. Just stay tonight. Eat dinner with me. Watch one of those terrible horror movies you love. We can talk more tomorrow. Or not talk. Whatever you need. Mia didn't answer right away. She just stood there, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding everything in place. Finally, she nodded, small, almost imperceptible. Okay, she said. One night. I didn't push for more. I just stepped aside so she could go back inside. She paused at the doorway. Dad? Yeah? I'm scared. Me too, kiddo. But we'll be scared together. That's better than being scared alone. She disappeared up the stairs. I heard her door close softly. Not slammed, just closed. I stayed in the garage a while longer, staring at the oil stain where Sophie's car used to park. The space looked wrong now, too big, too empty. I thought about calling Ray, or my sister, or anyone who'd listen, but I didn't. Tonight wasn't for talking it out with friends. Tonight was for sitting with the wreckage and deciding what came next. Eventually, I went inside, started the kettle for tea, Mia's favorite chamomile, and pulled 2 frozen pizzas from the freezer. Nothing fancy. Just food, normalcy in small doses. While the oven preheated, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to the lawyer. Subject, custody and asset. Update attached the latest video timestamped tonight. Sophie vacated premises voluntarily this afternoon. Mia currently residing here. Emotional state fragile but stable. Request mediation ASAP. No contested property beyond equitable division. Primary goal, protect Mia's stability. I hit send, closed the laptop, and leaned against the counter. The house smelled like garlic and tomato sauce when Mia came down 40 minutes later. She'd washed her face, changed into sweats, hair in a messy bun. She looked younger again, vulnerable. Pizza? She asked. Pizza, I confirmed. Extra cheese, no vegetables, your rules. A ghost of a smile. Good. We ate in the living room, plates balanced on laps, some low-budget slasher playing on the TV. Neither of us paid much attention to the screen. We just sat. Together. Quiet. Halfway through, Mia spoke without looking at me. I don't hate you. I nodded. I know. But I miss her. I know that too. She reached over, took my hand. Her fingers were cold. I squeezed gently. We'll figure it out, I said. Yeah, she whispered. Maybe. The movie ended. Credits rolled. The house settled into its nighttime sounds, furnace clicking on, wind against the windows. Mia stood. I'm going to bed. Sleep well. She paused at the foot of the stairs. Dad? Yeah? Thanks for not yelling. I never will. She climbed the steps slowly. Her door clicked shut. I stayed on the couch a long time after, lights off, staring at the blank TV screen. My reflection looked back. Tired eyes, stubble, the same man who'd once thought marriage was forever. It wasn't, but fatherhood still was, and that was enough to keep going. Tomorrow I'd wake up, make coffee, drive Mia to school if she let me. I'd call the lawyer. I'd open the shop. I'd keep breathing. One day at a time. One small, ordinary, painful day at a time. And somewhere in there, maybe, just maybe, we'd start to heal. Uncle Troy is married to someone else. He's divorced, has been for 2 years, and he's successful and sophisticated in everything you're not. The lies came so easily to her, I almost believed them myself. But I'd done my research on Troy Brennan, and I knew the truth. Never married, a string of relationships with married women, a reputation as a predator who specialized in bored housewives looking for excitement. Where are you getting your information? From Mom, from Uncle Troy. from people who actually know what they're talking about instead of making assumptions and jumping to conclusions. Your mother is having an affair, Mia. That's not an assumption, it's a fact. Your mother is trying to find some happiness in a life that's been slowly killing her. If you can't understand that, if you can't support her, then maybe she's better off without you. Mia turned to leave, then paused at the door. I'm going to stay with Mom and Uncle Troy until you come to your senses. Don't try to stop me. You're 16 years old. You don't get to decide where you live. Watch me. She was gone before I could respond, leaving me alone in the garage with the echo of my wife's words coming from my daughter's mouth. The two women I'd built my life around had not only abandoned me, they'd declared war. My phone rang, Ray's name on the caller ID. Jake, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the gym? What's wrong? Just come down here, now. Ray's gym occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse in the industrial district, all exposed brick and hanging heavy bags and the smell of sweat and determination. It was my sanctuary, the place where I'd learned to fight and later learned to control my temper. Walking through those doors always made me feel centered, focused, ready for whatever came next. Ray was waiting for me in his office, along with two other men I recognized from the neighborhood, Mike Torino, who owned a construction company, and Dave Walsh, a plumber who'd been doing business with both of us for years. Sit down, Jake, Ray said grimly. I took the offered chair and waited for bad news. It didn't take long. Word's gotten around about Sophie and this Troy character, Mike said without preamble. People are talking. Let them talk. It's not that simple, Dave added. Some of these people are your customers. Were your customers. The bottom of my stomach dropped out. What are you saying? Ray leaned forward, his expression sympathetic but firm. Mrs. Patterson called this morning and canceled her service appointment. Said she didn't feel comfortable bringing her car to you anymore, given the situation with your family. The Hendersons called too, Mike continued, and the Johnsons, and at least 6 other people I know personally. They're embarrassed for you, Dave explained. They don't know how to act around you, what to say. It's easier to just take their business elsewhere. I sat in stunned silence, processing the implications. My customer base was built on relationships, on trust, and personal connections developed over 15 years. If those relationships were compromised by gossip and embarrassment, my business was finished. There's more, Ray said quietly. Tom Bradley called. Someone's been spreading rumors about your financial situation, suggesting you might be going out of business soon. A couple of your suppliers are asking for payment up front instead of extending credit. Who would do that? Someone who wants to hurt you. Someone with connections in the business community. Troy Brennan. It had to be. He was systematically destroying my reputation, my business, my ability to support myself and my daughter. This wasn't just about stealing my wife, it was about erasing me entirely. What do you want to do about it? Mike asked. I looked around the room at these 3 men, friends who'd stood by me through good times and bad, who'd shown up tonight to warn me about what was coming instead of just disappearing like everyone else. I want to fight back. How? I don't know yet, but I'm not going down without a fight. Ray nodded approvingly. Good. Because we're with you, whatever you decide to do. Why? This isn't your fight. Yes, it is, Dave said firmly. We've all been where you are. Maybe not exactly the same situation, but we've all had people try to destroy us, try to take what we've built. We stick together. Mike leaned back in his chair, a calculating expression on his face. This Troy Brennan, what do we know about him? Rich, successful, owns that club downtown, apparently has connections with city officials and police. Everyone has weaknesses, Mike said. Everyone has secrets they don't want exposed. We just need to find his. How do we do that? Ray smiled for the first time all evening. Leave that to us. You focus on your legal situation and getting your daughter back. We'll handle the research. I felt something I hadn't experienced since this whole nightmare began. Hope. Not the desperate hope of a man trying to save his marriage, but the cold, focused hope of someone preparing for war. What about Sophie? I asked. What about her? She's still my wife, still Mia's mother. I don't want to destroy her. I just want her to face consequences for her choices. Ray studied my face carefully. You sure about that? Because once we start down this road, there's no going back. People get hurt, reputations get destroyed, lives get ruined. I thought about Sophie laughing in Troy's arms, about Mia's contempt, about the customers who'd abandoned me rather than face the embarrassment of association. I thought about 15 years of marriage reduced to a business transaction, and a daughter who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to her mother's happiness. I'm sure. Then let's get to work. 3 weeks later, I sat in Tom Bradley's office reviewing the final divorce papers. Sophie had hired her own attorney, a shark from downtown who specialized in high-net-worth divorces and had a reputation for bleeding opposing parties dry. But Tom had done his homework, and the evidence of Sophie's affair gave us significant leverage. She's agreed to split the house proceeds 50-50, Tom explained. And you keep the garage and all business assets. She keeps her retirement accounts, you keep yours. The big issue is custody. What's she asking for? Full custody of Mia, with supervised visitation for you. Her attorney is arguing that you're emotionally unstable and potentially dangerous. Based on what? The fact that you threw her out of the house and have been stalking and harassing her new boyfriend. I hadn't been stalking Troy Brennan, but I had been building a case against him. Ray's research had turned up some interesting information about Pulse's business practices, and Mike's construction contacts had provided insight into the club's building permits and safety violations. Dave's plumbing connections had revealed issues with the club's water and sewer systems that the city inspector might find very interesting. What about the affair? Doesn't that count for anything? In custody matters, not as much as you'd think. Illinois courts focus on the best interests of the child, not the moral failings of the parents, and Mia has made it clear she wants to live with her mother. That was the knife that twisted deepest. My daughter had chosen sides, and she hadn't chosen mine. There is one piece of good news, Tom continued. The private investigator we hired has uncovered some information about Mr. Brennan that might be useful. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photos, financial records, and witness statements that painted a very different picture of Troy Brennan than the successful businessman he pretended to be. Pulse is hemorrhaging money, Tom explained. Brennan's been using it to launder cash from some questionable sources, and he's got debts to people who don't accept late payments gracefully. The IRS is already investigating, and there's a good chance the club will be shut down within 6 months. What about Sophie? Does she know any of this? Doubtful. Brennan's been very careful to maintain his image as a successful entrepreneur. Your wife thinks she's traded up to a wealthy, sophisticated man. In reality, she's attached herself to a sinking ship. I studied the photographs. Troy meeting with known criminals, accepting envelopes full of cash, signing documents in the back rooms of restaurants that served as fronts for money laundering operations. The man who'd stolen my wife was a criminal, and Sophie had no idea what she'd gotten herself into. What do you recommend? We use this information strategically, not to destroy your wife, but to protect your daughter. If Brennan goes down, and he will, Mia could get caught in the crossfire. We need to get her away from him before that happens. How? We show Sophie exactly who she's been sleeping with, give her a chance to make the right choice for once. That evening, I drove to the downtown apartment where Sophie had been staying. It was one of those converted loft buildings that attracted young professionals who wanted to live in the city but couldn't afford the really expensive neighborhoods. The kind of place that looked sophisticated but felt hollow, all exposed brick and industrial fixtures with no soul. Sophie answered the door, wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's car payments. She looked good, better than she had in years, but there was something brittle about her appearance, like she was trying too hard to be someone she wasn't. "Jake, what are you doing here? We need to talk. About Mia. If this is another attempt to get me to come home, it's not. Can I come in?" Sophie stepped aside reluctantly, and I entered an apartment that looked like it had been decorated by someone with more money than taste. Everything was expensive and cold, from the leather furniture to the abstract art on the walls. "Nice place. Troy's? We're sharing it temporarily while I figure out my living situation." "Where is he?" "At the club. He works late most nights." I sat down on the couch without being invited, and Sophie perched on the edge of a chair like she was ready to flee at any moment. "How's Mia adjusting?" "She loves it here. She loves Troy, loves the excitement of city life. She's finally getting to see what she's been missing stuck in that suburban bubble." "Sophie, there are some things you need to know about Troy, things that could put Mia in danger." "Don't start with your jealous accusations again, Jake. I'm not interested." I pulled out the folder Tom had given me and set it on the coffee table between us. "This isn't jealousy. This is fact." Sophie opened the folder reluctantly, her expression shifting from annoyance to confusion to horror as she absorbed the contents. The photographs were damning, but the financial records were worse. Evidence of systematic money laundering, tax evasion, and connections to organized crime figures. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter? The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Sophie set down the papers with shaking hands. "These could be faked, photoshopped. You're desperate enough to do anything to get me back. Call the IRS. Ask them about their investigation into Pulse's finances. Call the city building inspector and ask about the safety violations. This is real, Sophie, and it's going to come crashing down very soon. Even if it's true, and I'm not saying it is, it doesn't change anything between us. Troy made some mistakes in business. That doesn't make him a monster. He's using you, Sophie. You and every other married woman who's fallen for his act. You think you're special, but you're just another conquest, another way for him to feel powerful." Sophie's face flushed with anger. "At least he makes me feel something. At least he sees me as more than just a cook and housekeeper and occasional bedmate. He sees you as a fool, a bored housewife with money and connections who can help legitimize his criminal enterprise. Get out. Sophie, get out now before I call the police and have you arrested for harassment." I stood up slowly, leaving the folder on the coffee table. "Keep the documents. Show them to a lawyer who doesn't work for Troy. Protect our daughter even if you won't protect yourself. Mia is perfectly safe with us." "Is she? When the IRS freezes his assets and the police raid his club and his criminal associates come looking for their money, is she going to be safe then?" For the first time since I'd arrived, Sophie looked uncertain. The possibility that she'd made a terrible mistake was beginning to penetrate her fantasy of sophisticated city life. "This is all speculation," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's reality, and reality has a way of catching up with people who try to ignore it." I walked to the door, then paused with my hand on the handle. "I loved you, Sophie. For 15 years, I loved you completely, faithfully, without reservation. I would have done anything to make you happy, been anything you needed me to be. But I won't compete with a criminal for my own wife, and I won't let my daughter get caught in the crossfire when his world collapses. Jake, the divorce papers are ready to sign whenever you are. Tom Bradley has copies, but Mia comes home with me, where she'll be safe." I left Sophie sitting in that cold, expensive apartment with evidence of her lover's crimes spread across the coffee table and the wreckage of 15 years scattered around her feet. 2 days later, the FBI raided Pulse during the dinner rush. Troy Brennan was arrested on charges of money laundering, tax evasion, and racketeering. The club was shut down immediately, its assets frozen pending investigation. Sophie called me at midnight, crying so hard I could barely understand her words. "You were right," she sobbed, "about everything. I'm so sorry, Jake. I'm so incredibly sorry. Where's Mia? Here with me. She's scared, confused. She doesn't understand what's happening. Bring her home. Is there any chance we could work this out? Could you ever forgive me? I closed my eyes, thinking about the woman I'd loved for 15 years and the stranger she'd become. I don't know, Sophie. Right now, I just want my daughter safe. I'll bring her home tomorrow. Good. Jake? Yeah? I know I don't deserve it, but could you not say I told you so? I feel stupid enough already. Despite everything, I almost smiled. I won't say it, but we both know I'm thinking it. The next morning, Sophie's BMW pulled into our driveway for the first time in a month. Mia climbed out slowly, looking younger than her 16 years and thoroughly humbled by recent events. Sophie followed, carrying the same 2 suitcases she'd left with, but now they seemed like the possessions of a refugee rather than a woman embarking on a new life. I met them in the garage, the same place where this whole nightmare had begun. Dad, Mia said quietly, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything except honesty from now on. I was wrong about you, about Uncle Troy, about everything. I opened my arms, and my daughter fell into them like she used to when she was small and the world had hurt her feelings. She was crying, and I was crying, and for the first time in weeks, something felt right. Sophie stood in the doorway watching us, her face a mask of regret and loss. I'll find an apartment, she said quietly, somewhere close so Mia can see both of us. We'll figure it out, I said, and meant it. Jake? Yeah? Thank you for protecting her when I couldn't, for being the man I forgot you were. I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. She'd thrown away 15 years of marriage and nearly destroyed our daughter's life chasing a fantasy that had turned into a nightmare. The sophisticated life she'd craved had revealed itself to be a criminal enterprise, and the exciting man she'd fallen for was now facing 20 years in federal prison. We all make mistakes, Sophie. The trick is learning from them. She nodded and turned to leave, then paused at the door one last time. For what it's worth, I did love you. I still do. I just forgot how to show it. I know. After she left, Mia and I sat in my office talking about what came next. She would finish high school, go to college, build a life based on substance rather than surface. I would rebuild my business, repair the relationships damaged by gossip and scandal, and maybe someday find someone who appreciated the simple, honest life I had to offer. Dad? Yeah? Are you going to be okay? I looked around the garage, at the tools and equipment that represented 15 years of hard work, at the photos of family and friends that decorated my office walls, at the life I'd built one satisfied customer at a time. Yeah, kiddo, I'm going to be just fine. 6 months later, Troy Brennan was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Sophie found a small apartment across town and a job with a law firm that specialized in helping small businesses navigate regulatory compliance. She was learning, slowly and painfully, the difference between excitement and chaos, between sophistication and criminality. Mia graduated high school with honors and received a full scholarship to study business at Northwestern University. She wanted to understand how companies worked, how to build something lasting and legitimate, how to avoid the mistakes her mother had made. As for me, I kept fixing cars and building relationships and living the simple, honest life that had once seemed so inadequate. My customer base slowly returned as the scandal faded, and people remembered that reliability and integrity were worth more than flash and excitement. I never remarried, though I dated occasionally. I was in no hurry to trust someone with my heart again, and I'd learned that being alone was better than being with someone who didn't appreciate what you had to offer. On quiet evenings in my garage, working on some customer's car while the radio played classic rock and the world spun peacefully outside, I sometimes thought about the choice Sophie had made and the price she'd paid for it. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't regret the way things had ended. She'd wanted passion and excitement and consequences. She'd gotten all three, just not in the way she'd expected. And I'd learned something valuable about myself. I was stronger than I'd thought, more resilient than I'd imagined, and worthy of respect even when the people closest to me couldn't see it. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed by someone else's poor choices. Sometimes the best victory is the quiet satisfaction of knowing you were right all along.